Here's our Portworx cluster. You can see here there are 6 nodes. This is backing our Kubernetes clusters that we'll be showing this demo on. Inside Lighthouse, you can pick specific volumes. We'll be working with CockroachDB, so here's one of the PVCs backing it. You can see some of the information inside of that database. Here you can see both clusters at the node level. Now we're going to get the namespaces in both clusters. This will show that the CockroachDB namespace is available in our primary cluster, but not yet in the DR site. Here's our primary CockroachDB cluster. There's 3 nodes in here. You can see that we have a few databases. Our DR site doesn't have the CockroachDB UI available. And here we can see we can go in the primary and select from our bank database to see that we have some records in our database table. Now, in order to start migrations from a primary to a DR site, you first have to have a cluster pair. Here we have our DR site status ready. And then you have to have a migration schedule. This migration schedule can target specific namespaces or applications. In this case, we are targeting the CockroachDB namespace with a policy that will start migrations about every 1 minute. Go ahead and create this, and this will kick off our initial migration and continue those migrations every 1 minute. Here we can look at the active migrations currently happening. Here we can see the first one's already successful. All 11 objects have been migrated. So on our DR site, we can see that CockroachDB namespace is now available about 15 seconds ago. Now, just because the objects are being migrated on a schedule doesn't mean anything's running in the DR site. So here you can see that the stateful set is still 0 out of 0, and it's still running in our primary site. At this point, we're ready for a failure event, and we can see that DR site is not running anything yet. That's what we want. Now, in the case of a failure, we're going to simulate a failover occurrence from our primary to our DR site. We'll watch the stateful set to see what's happening. Our clusters become out of sync because of the failure event in the primary, and everything gets turned on in the DR site. Here we can see our primary is down because it's moving to our DR site, and if we refresh our DR site, our CockroachDB becomes available. This takes a couple minutes or less depending on what applications you're trying to migrate. Just to confirm, primary is down and DR site up. We can double check all of our data is still intact by running the same query against our bank database. And here we can see all of our records are still available. Now, in many cases, your primary site will become available again. So you need to fail back to our primary site. Here we can get a watch going on our pods in the CockroachDB namespace. And we'll simulate a fail back scenario with this simple script which activates the primary site again. And as that's happening, the DR site syncs back up with the primary, meaning any deltas of the data gets pushed back to the primary, and both become in sync again, and you can turn everything back on the primary. So now that we're both in sync here, we can turn things back on in the primary site, and you can see the applications coming back up. Now our DR site is starting to come down, and our primary site should be available once again. Everything's running there. Our DR site is down. Our primary site is up and running. Now we can double check and make sure our data is still available back in our primary and run that query again. And there is our data